So I wanted to kind of introduce into the conversation some late breaking news. This is not characteristic for the this podcast, but since we started our recording, Facebook announced that they're going to be shutting down their facial recognition system. Is
Interesting.
this since we started recording? Thereabouts.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah, we
Obviously,
can.
you haven't been reading that, but you've been following what the company's been doing. And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's first of all indicative of how toxic the term facial recognition has gotten. Also, apparently, how ubiquitous. Somebody the other day was mentioning that that people sort of sometimes kind of use facial recognition as synonymous for any kind of computer vision, right? Oh, we use
Mhm.
facial recognition to identify this guitar. That's interesting. But anywho, facial recognition, as a term, is clearly really toxic, and clearly something that the tech companies don't want to be involved with. Um, Facebook is, of course, rebranding itself, right? It's
Yeah.
had a lot of press this week, going to Meta, talking about the metaverse. What's the metaverse? The metaverse is virtual reality, right? The metaverse
Mhm.
is about it, which includes creating digital avatars of users, right? Facebook has been researching how to do physiological scans of bodies to produce more precise, more accurate avatars for some time,
Mhm.
and so uh, Facebook may be shutting down some aspect of its photo facial recognition, right? But Facebook is still very interested in collecting data about the body and
Mm.
using that data to collect information about its users to model it. In fact, VR technologies collect enormous amounts of data, not just about the face, right, but about heart rate, movement, right, you name it, right? They're doing a very granular scan of what how you're moving, how you're acting. It's interesting that this comes up actually because there is a whole connection with these conversations around facial recognition and physiognomy and stereotypes with animation actually, right?
Mm.
Animation in terms of cartoons, in terms of CGI, right? And one of the big challenges with animation is that the easiest way to convey emotion in animation is through a stereotype. It's through some kind of physical, big eyes or it's tiny mouth, right?
Mhm.
And so you get all of these conventions, all these stereotypes, from animation that begin to inflect how we think about people, how we think about people's emotional expression and their other kinds of expression. And now we're getting to the point, right, where social media companies are trying to collect, trying to animate users, right, for their own ends. An interesting move by Facebook, but not maybe totally shocking or unexpected.
Mhm. Mhm. You also raise an interesting point that while they are shutting down facial recognition, in many ways, their stated direction requires a lot, requires them to do what you find uh most frustrating about facial recognition, which is digitize the body and make
Right.
representations of that in maybe in some other universe or some digital world.
Right, some digital representation, exactly, and a bunch of companies have done this over the last couple of years, right? So, what did Amazon said they were going to do a moratorium on using their facial recognition systems for police departments?
Hmm.
Okay, well, that's very narrow. All these announcements from various companies sounded good. They got good headlines, right? If you dug into it, they were, either they weren't really in that business anyway, and so there was no skin off their back to say they weren't going to be in it anymore, right? Or it was a very limited part of what they were
Hmm.
providing. So yeah, I think that's deflection, right, on Facebook's part. And I think again that's actually partially why we really wanted to go beyond facial recognition, right, in this paper and say there's this whole class of classifying technologies and classificatory technologies, and because you don't because we don't want to play whack-a-mole all the time, right? People in tech often complain that regulators can't keep up with the technology, but part of that is because of the argument that every technology is new, even if some of these technologies have a lot of common denominators in terms of
Hmm.
their conceptual basis or their technical basis. Um, and so that's kind of I think a ban on physiognomic AI analysis, yeah, would, you could apply that to thinking about virtual reality avatars, especially if those are grounded in digital data, and if they're being, if machine learning is being used to extrapolate or that animation.